You're being watched right now. And whoever's watching, you knows exactly what you're going to do next. Not because they're psychic. Not because they hacked your phone. Because they did the math. Welcome to game theory. The science of outsmarting people who are also trying to outsmart you. Here's what's wild. Well, this isn't just about chess, or poker, or whether to go all in on Boardwalk with 2 hotels. Game theory is the actual mathematical framework that governments use to decide whether to go to war. It's what companies use to crush their competitors. It's what you, at age 14, were already doing perfectly every single time you had to decide whether to snitch on your friend or take the fall yourself. You were doing game theory. You just didn't know it had a name. So, let's back up. What even is a game in the math sense? Because we're not just talking about fun. A game, mathematically speaking, is any situation where multiple players make decisions that affect each other's outcomes. That's it. That's simple. A game is you and at least one other person, both making choices, both affected by what the other chooses. By that definition, every conversation you've ever had is a game. Every negotiation. Every job interview. Every time you and your roommate both pretended not to see the dishes. Game. Now here's the first big split you need to understand, because everything builds from this. Games come in 2 flavors, zero-sum and non-zero-sum. And the difference is massive. A zero-sum game is exactly what it sounds like. There's a fixed amount of stuff, and whatever you win, I lose. Poker is zero-sum. The money doesn't appear out of nowhere. Every dollar in your stack used to be in someone else's stack. Chess is zero-sum. There's one winner and one loser. Your gain is literally my loss. The pie doesn't grow. We're just fighting over who gets which slice. Non-zero-sum games are different. In a non-zero-sum game, cooperation can make the total outcome bigger. The pie itself can grow. Or shrink, depending on what everyone chooses. Think about 2 competing coffee shops on the same block. If they both run dirty smear campaigns against each other, they both lose customers. If they both focus on making good coffee, they both make money, even though they're competitors. The market grows. That's non-zero sum. And here's the thing, most of real life is non-zero sum. International trade. Climate agreements. Your group project that counts for 40% of your grade. All of it. But wait, if cooperation is so obviously better in non-zero sum situations, why does everyone keep betraying each other constantly throughout all of human history? Why do countries break treaties? Why does your group project always have one person doing nothing? Why is every Monopoly game a crime scene by turn 6? Because here's the terrifying part. Even when cooperation is the best outcome for everyone, it's not always the best outcome for you individually. And that gap, that razor-thin gap between good for us and good for me, is where game theory gets genuinely dark. And genuinely useful. So let's talk about the most famous thought experiment in all of social science. It's called the prisoner's dilemma. And no, you don't need to actually be in prison to understand it. Although if you are, take notes. This is very relevant to your current situation. 2 people got arrested. Let's call them Alex and Jordan. They're being held in separate rooms. They can't talk to each other. Each one has 2 options. Stay quiet, which is called cooperating in the math, or sell out the other person, which is called defecting. Here's the payoff structure. If both stay quiet, both get 1 year in prison. If one betrays and the other stays quiet, the betrayer goes free and the loyal one gets 3 years. If both betray each other, they both get 2 years. Now think about this from Alex's perspective. Alex has no idea what Jordan is doing right now. What should Alex do? If Jordan stays quiet, Alex can betray and go free. Or stay quiet and get 1 year. Betraying is better. If Jordan betrays, Alex can betray too and get 2 years. Or stay quiet and get 3 years. Betraying is still better. No matter what Jordan does, betray. Betray is always the rational choice for Alex. And Jordan is doing the exact same math. So both betray. Both get 2 years. When if they'd just both stayed quiet, they'd have only gotten 1 year each. They made the individually rational choice. And collectively, they both got screwed. That's the prisoner's dilemma. The outcome that logic leads you to is worse than the outcome cooperation would have gotten you. Both players defect. Nobody wins. Welcome to humanity. So now you might be thinking, okay, but in real life, people aren't just playing one game once and walking away. You see the same people again. You have a reputation. Surely that changes things, right? Good instinct. That's exactly where this gets interesting. When the prisoner's dilemma gets played repeatedly, like in an ongoing relationship, a business partnership, an arms race, something shifts. Because now betrayal has consequences beyond this round. If you sell me out today, I'll remember that tomorrow. And suddenly, cooperation starts looking a lot smarter. This is called the iterated prisoner's dilemma. And the strategy that beats almost everything else in computer simulations actual computer tournament scientists ran is called Tit-for-Tat. Start by cooperating. Then do whatever the other person did last round. That's it. That's the whole strategy. Cooperate until they betray you, then betray back, then forgive them if they cooperate again. Simple. Responsive. Not a pushover. And it absolutely dominates. Which, honestly, that's just a mathematical proof that your mom's advice about treating people how they treat you was correct all along. Vindicated by mathematics. But here's where we need to talk about John Nash. Because this is the guy who changed everything. He's the one from that movie. A Beautiful Mind, Russell Crowe, the writing on windows, the whole thing. And the idea he came up with in 1950 at age 21, while he was losing his mind in the most productive way possible, is called the Nash Equilibrium. Here's what it means. In any game, a Nash Equilibrium is a situation where no player can improve their outcome by changing only their own strategy, assuming everyone else stays the same. Nobody has any reason to switch. Everyone is playing the best response to what everyone else is doing. The game has stabilized. It found its resting point. Now, hold on. This doesn't mean the equilibrium is good. This is crucial. This is where people get confused. Nash Equilibrium is not the same as the best outcome. Remember the prisoner's dilemma? Both players betraying each other is a Nash Equilibrium. Because if you're already betraying, and I switch to cooperating while you keep betraying, I get 3 years instead of 2. I get worse. So I won't switch. And vice versa. The system is stable. Stable and terrible. Nash Equilibrium is the answer to, given that everyone is already playing this way, does anyone have a reason to change? Not, is this good? Just, is this stable? And those are very different questions. And now, okay, pause. Just for 1 second. I want you to actually feel how wild this is. In 1994, John Nash won the Nobel Prize in Economics for this idea. Not physics. Not medicine. Economics. For a math concept about games. But here's what that prize actually represented. The realization that this tool, this single idea about stable strategy, applies to literally everything. Evolutionary biology uses it to explain why animals cooperate or fight. Computer science uses it to design algorithms. Auction theory, which determines how spectrum rights for your cell phone service get sold to carriers, is built entirely on Nash equilibria. Wah. The nuclear deterrence strategy of the entire Cold War, 2 superpowers pointing thousands of warheads at each other for 50 years without firing, is a Nash equilibrium. Neither side had a reason to fire first, because firing first guaranteed retaliation. Mutual assured destruction was not a policy failure. It was a Nash equilibrium. Stable. Horrifying, but stable. Think about that. The same math that describes why you should fold in poker describes why the Soviet Union didn't nuke Kansas. Same equations. Different stakes. Now let's talk about mixed strategies, because this is where your brain might try to resist, and you should push through, because this is the part that explains bluffing, and bluffing explains almost everything fun in human behavior. A pure strategy means you always do the same thing. Always cooperate. Always defect. Always serve to the left in tennis. Always bid high at auction. A mixed strategy means you randomize. You cooperate 70% of the time and defect 30%. You serve left 60% of the time. And here's why that matters. In many games, a pure strategy is exploitable. If I always cooperate, you'll always defect. If I always serve left, you'll always lean left. But if I randomize in the right proportions, you can't gain anything by predicting me, because I'm unpredictable by design. The Nash Equilibrium in these games isn't a single choice. It's a probability distribution. It's a recipe for randomness, which means the mathematically optimal strategy in poker, in penalty kicks in soccer, in military deception, is to be genuinely, strategically unpredictable. Randomness as a weapon. That's not a metaphor. That is the theorem. So here's what we've built so far. Games are any situation where choices interact. Zero sum means fixed pie pure competition. Non-zero sum means the pie can grow or shrink. Cooperation matters. Rational players in the prisoner's dilemma betray each other and both lose because individual logic and collective logic aren't the same thing. Nash equilibria are the stable resting points of strategy, not necessarily the good ones. An optimal play sometimes requires controlled randomness. Now let's apply all of this to the real world, because this is where it stops feeling like math and starts feeling like a cheat code for life. Auctions. Specifically, the kind where you're buying something and you don't know what anyone else is willing to pay. The government uses these to sell oil drilling rights. Companies use them to buy advertising slots on Google. How do you bid? Too low, you lose the thing. Too high, you overpay and win something worth less than you paid for it, which is called the winner's curse, and it's a real, documented phenomenon where the person who wins a competitive auction often paid more than the thing is worth. Because winning means you were the most optimistic. And being the most optimistic in an auction is often the same as being the most wrong. The Nash Equilibrium strategy says, shade your bid below your true valuation, because your true valuation is probably inflated by competition. Same math. Poker. Real estate. eBay. Every auction you've ever been in. Or take something messier. International trade negotiations. Two countries both want good terms. If both cooperate and open their markets, both economies grow, non-zero sum, pie gets bigger. But if one country opens up while the other slaps tariffs on everything, the open country gets destroyed. So both countries are sitting there doing exactly the same prisoner's dilemma calculation that Alex and Jordan did in that interrogation room. And they often end up with trade wars that hurt both sides, not because anyone wanted that outcome, but because the Nash equilibrium of distrust led them there. Treaties and trade agreements are, mathematically, humanity's attempt to rewrite the payoff matrix, to change the rules of the game so that cooperation becomes the rational individual choice, not just the collectively nice one. That's what diplomacy actually is. Applied game theory. Renegotiating the numbers in the matrix. And now Monopoly. We promised you Monopoly. Here's the thing about Monopoly with friends. It perfectly demonstrates why non-zero-sum games destroy relationships. Early in the game, everyone can trade, cooperate, help each other block the leader. The pie is big, cooperation is possible, everyone's having fun. But as the game goes on, it collapses towards zero sum. There's only one winner. Someone's going to lose everything. And the moment that shift happens, the moment people stop cooperating and start surviving, you see the pure prisoner's dilemma logic take over. People make deals they know they'll break. People betray alliances the moment it's individually rational to do so. People flip boards. Game theory correctly predicts that Monopoly ends in a broken friendship. That's not a bug in the game. That's the math. And this is why the meme that board games destroy families is not just a meme. It's an empirical observation about Nash equilibria under resource scarcity. You're welcome. So zoom back out. All the way back to where we started. Someone is watching you. And they know what you're gonna do. But here's the twist. You can use that. If the other player is rational, and they know you're rational, and they know that you know that they're rational, you can model their decision. You can anticipate the equilibrium. You can build your strategy around it. This is what game theory actually gives you, not a guarantee of winning. Games don't come with guarantees. What it gives you is a map of the decision landscape. It shows you where the stable points are, where the traps are, where cooperation is actually the rational move, and where it's the sucker's move. It lets you see the matrix behind the situation. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The math of betrayal turns out to be the math of survival. The math of bluffing turns out to be the math of optimal randomness. The math of a game turns out to be the math of life. And the wildest part? Game theory assumes rational players. But humans are famously, gloriously irrational. Which opens a question that the field is still wrestling with right now. If people don't always act rationally, do Nash equilibria actually predict real behavior? Or are we using a perfect mathematical model to describe an imperfect species? And we don't fully know yet. And that gap between the math of what we should do and the chaos of what we actually do might be the most interesting question in all of science.